what's the what's the context in which the organization is operating, what interventions we are going to be making, what are going to be the broader outcomes, what are the activities that are going to come out of it, what are the assumptions that we are going to be making. This is something which is usually made during the initial conceptualization of the program when you have done some research around it and you're bridging it. It's usually, typically, theory of change would come in a narrative format. It would come in a like slightly visual in nature. So in our context, for the organization that we spoke about, which is working on the adolescents literacy, what can be a potential theory of change? Uh, the input being that we are actually going to be training the teachers. We will be actively engaging the community uh, in and around the beneficiaries that we are going to be working with, which includes all the relevant stakeholders, be it be the government partners, be it be the schools, be it be the parents that are there. And we will be actively mobilizing the resources, right? What it in turn is essentially going to do is the assumption being that we will have better teaching practices, that would be the outcome. There will be better parental support, factoring in that there is a community engagement that is happening, that in turn will improve students' attendance. And as an organization or as a program, we will be able to achieve higher literacy rate. So that's more or less a very brief theory of change that can potentially look like for the organization. Now, log frame. Again, like as a from an approach point of view, it is a very broader concept. Uh, Again, debatable whether it comes in the M&E plan or not. In my opinion, it comes because it essentially guides. What is a log framework matrix over here? It is essentially a matrix that guides that breaks the organization's broader goals, outcomes into smaller measurable indicators. That's what it does based on certain assumptions, and it bridges certain elements as to how we can actually go about measuring those. So it brings out how we are going to measure the indicators for the organization. For example, going back to the theory of change, the impact being in the case study that we undertook, that we want to improve the literacy rate. Now, one possible indicator for that can essentially look like the literacy test scores that might give us that understanding. How can we go about verifying that? Maybe like some literacy surveys, national literacy surveys. How that might actually happen is like an assumption over here is that the government will continue to support us. Well, that's an assumption that we've undertaken. For us to hit the long-term impact, what are going to be those outcomes that need to happen? One element of it is going to be like for improved literacy rate, what needs to happen is that there should be enhanced literacy skill. What can be a potential indicator for that? Maybe like percent of student reading at grade level. That can be like a fairly decent indicator for this, uh, for us to know what's the improvement looking like. And a means of verification for that can be like we can check the school records, we can do certain assessments around reading tests. Assumption is that students are regularly attending school, right? The other, for this outcome to happen, what outputs need to happen? What we mean by output is like the immediate outcomes or like immediate deliverables that needs to happen to ensure the delivery of outcome. Like for us to have enhanced literacy skills, we definitely need to ensure that okay, the teachers in the schools are actually trained, right? We need to ensure that the parents are involved. We need to ensure that the right resources are in place. So maybe like a few possible indicators for this can be like the number of teachers that are actually trained, right? Number of parents that are actually attending, or percent of parents that are attending the sessions, how many resources we were actually able to distribute against the number of resources that were required. A means of verification for this can be like some training attendance that we can do, session reports, distribution record. Assumption is that now for this to happen, like one assumption that we are operating is that whatever training that we are doing, teachers are implementing those trainings, right? For that output, now there has to be certain activities that needs to happen, right? Like how will teachers will get trained? Like it's like we will be doing training sessions, maybe we'll be doing workshop sessions, maybe we'll be going on ground doing certain things, we will be going on ground distributing books, Organizing sessions, what can be the possible indicators for that? Like pretty straightforward, flows very smoothly, like number of training sessions that might be conducted, number of sessions that are held, how many books were distributed. Again, like how are we going to verify that? Maybe like the what how the training schedule look like, what are the sessions agendas, distribution log, what can be the assumption over here? Like few assumptions can be like the teachers are participating, parents are participating, students are participating in these activities that are being undertaken. Once you have completed your logic framework, right, this can go quite detailed. Like even for this example, we can go more into details, which will essentially start to generate, okay, what will be the macro indicator? Now, out of these indicators that we have listed down, what will be the macro indicator? What will be the micro indicators? That can be either be part of your logic framework, or it can essentially serve as another file, which essentially talks about, okay, what are the things, what are the activities that are happening on ground, what are the indicators, what are the outcomes, out of which what are those macros, out of which what are those impact ones, what are immediate, what are long term. Those elements will start to appear, and that essentially serves as a base for you to go about now building the monitoring and evaluation plan as to how it will start to flow in. The next element, once you have your indicators in place, the other element that will now come in would be data management as to how data is essentially going to flow in. Now, what we need to realize is that different organization, different capacities, different program, different capacities, different requirement. One size fit all is not going to work in a system, right? So for a program, for different programs, there will be different ways of going about it. For different indicators, there will be different ways of going about it. If we, in the context of the case study that we took, what can be potential data sources? Data sources, what we mean by data sources is from where the data is actually going to come, right? How we will get that data. One potential source for this can be attendance logs. This is the attendance of the children that are there, uh, which is essentially going to inform us how many children are actually attending the classes, how many parents are coming for those community meetings. The other element can be the training assessment, how many teachers are actually trained, what is the feedback, how confident they feel, what is the movement that is happening with respect to their learning and development. The other element which would be pivotal would be like the literacy test scores. Right? How many of the children are actually able to progress further? What was their baseline? That is something that would be informed to us by literacy test scores. Data collection, again, different organization, different I mean, like for different programs, you will have different ways of collecting the data, which would be relevant for you. In our case study, the case study that we took, maybe like one way can be like where we are actually doing like a survey and questionnaire from on ground, where we are generating information from teachers, from students as to how our programmatic interventions are happening, whether they're feeling supported, not supported. This can be qualitative, quantitative in nature. Surveys and questionnaire can be like one way of collecting the data. The other would be observations. Now, in our case, it can be the teachers who are essentially making those relevant observations that are needed for us, considering that they are the ones who are doing the critical delivery with the children, with the adolescents that we are working with. So observations coming in from their side, observations coming in from whoever is there in your programmatic structures, be your program coordinator, program lead, as to how the program is happening. School records, essentially school records from different part of uh, the schools that you are supporting from an attendance point of view, as to how many children are performing, all those bits. This can be like another, like how data can be collected, and interviews, maybe like in-depth interviews where we are doing with the sample size, with the teachers, with the students to see how our program is happening. So interviews can be like another way of collecting the data. What we mean by governance is the overall management of how the data is going to be. So you got the data source, you collected the data, but how that data is actually going to be, how we are going to, what is going to be the data flow in the organization, how the organization is going to interact with that data. Uh, Few broader elements that are going to be one, for example, as part of data governance can be like, okay, what would be the frequency of data. Maybe like in our case, attendance log is something that is collected on a weekly basis. That we are on a weekly basis, we are generating data. That is something that is weekly. Uh, how the data is actually going to be maintained for that. Same. Similarly, for assessments, now this can be like after every training session that we are doing on ground with our teachers or with all the other relevant stakeholders, what is the feedback that is generating. So it can be like maybe like on a quarterly basis is something that can be done depending upon the cycle that we opt for. The other element of data governance essentially talks about data storage. What we mean by data storage is that once you have collected the data, where it is actually going to be stored. What is pivotal in this entire bit is we need to ensure that it is something which is safe, that you are not compromising data. Broader lens being that okay, this is something which you are able to access, like it is actually in an order, there is a proper infrastructure in place which you can ensure you are able to access. In our case it can be, let's say, like uh, the data is being stored on a cloud, maybe like a Google Drive, or if uh, like a Google Drive might essentially serve as a decent space for us to be able to store the data for something like this. And what is the infrastructure as to, so it's not something which is cluttered, that the data came in, which a lot of times we end up happening that okay, like now there is a big file, but we do not know how to navigate around it. So what might actually be useful is that there is a proper process that is actually laid out, that the data is collected, and this is the infrastructure. For example, for every grade, for every week, data stored in different folders, which is reflected in different dashboards, and you are able to access it. What we mean by data quality control is essentially how you are ensuring that the data that you are receiving is of quality and there are proper validations that are being kept in check. So this would include all the elements of one, the validation, ensuring that the right trainings are in place, right people are able to follow through with respect to the quality standards that are laid out in the organization. Some practical ways in our case can be that okay, like ensuring that the data that teachers are feeding in is something that is actually getting vetted on a weekly basis. The assessment is something that is actually getting audited on a monthly basis. There are different ways of ensuring that the quality of the data is being checked. And even with respect to when it is being done, for us to ensure that okay, like there are no double entries that are happening. In this case, maybe like attendance log, it cannot be like somebody has it over 110%. There are no double entries and all those things. So there are different ways of going about quality controls, which essentially conforms uh, to the overall one, the requirement of the program that you are building towards and what you need to deliver to, and the legal and regulatory bit. So one is internally from an organization point of view, what are the regulatory framework of data, things that you want to ensure uh, that you need to be mindful about, like something as simple as like if the moment you start working with children, in our case, one thing that you would want in the case that you were in the case study, in this case study, what something that I would definitely want to be mindful about is that the personal details of children are on a no to how basis, right? It is not something that is readily available. I'm conforming to the broader frameworks of the broader legal frameworks in the country, which might be like ensuring that it is in compliance with the JJ Act, that no personal information of the child is being shared. It is not something which is easily accessible for everybody. There are proper access, and relevant people are only able to use it and move around with the data. So those are some of the elements that you might want to that we might need to look into. Roles and responsibility. So in a monitoring and evaluation bit, what it essentially means is what are going to be the different roles of different players that are responsible through the like in the entire program, uh, how they will what accountability they will be holding. So different stakeholders might have different accountability. In the case study that we undertook, maybe teachers can be considering that they are the folks who are the prime who are doing the critical delivery of the intervention. They would need certain level of information for themselves So they can be the ones who will be responsible for primary data collections like attendance logs, uh, doing assessments for student in the form of like doing literacy tests and all those things. The students can be responsible for that. Program managers, coordinators can essentially be responsible for assessment of trainings, ensuring that when the trainings are happening for the teachers that we work with, uh, how, collection of the data, an analysis of the data, maybe like program coordinators can be responsible for that. And the data specialist team, essentially like the broader team, which is ensuring that the overall data management is in accordance with the governance model that we have as an organization, and it fits in the broader legal governance framework. And something in a nutshell, something who is responsible for what with respect to collection of data. Analysis. So I think yeah, the way to look at it would be like, again, for different program, it will have a different way of going about it, how you analyze it. The broader sense over here is how we are actually able to interpret the information that is coming from on ground, the information that is coming in from different stakeholder. How do we interpret it, and how do we try to make sense of it in a way that it is something which is you are able to share, it is something which you are able to make sense of. In the case study that we undertook, some of the qualitative analysis can essentially be like students feedback, the over a period of time, like how the students are responding, how well they feel with respect to the interventions that are being provided to them, how confident they feel. Similarly, like another qualitative analysis can essentially be the teachers' feedback, parents' feedback. The reason why it is slightly qualitative, I mentioned, is essentially there's a lot of feeler-based elements attached to it. It generates that level of language that, okay, like from a behavioral change point of view, from an understanding change point of view, this is the responses that are generating from on ground. Another analysis that might actually be useful would be like the quantitative analysis. In our case, it might be like the attendance trends, which would essentially be like how many children are actually attending the classes, how many adolescents are uh, turning week on week or every day with respect to the school for their schools, right? Similarly, like how many parents are coming in for the community meetings that are happening or for their parents teacher meeting, whatever is going to be relevant. The other element that would actually be extremely useful in our case would be like the literacy scores. What was the how the students are actually performing over and over a period of time. So we would want to do like assessments over a period of time, which essentially gives us that level of understanding. To make these happen, we might need to use different softwares. For and again depends on the project that you are doing and the scale and the capacity that you have. For something like this, maybe like an MS Office suite itself might suffice, like ensuring that okay, like all the data is there on Excel or Google Sheets. You are able to like the way the attendance logs or student feedbacks and all the feedbacks are presented in Tableau or in maybe like in Power BI dashboards and all those things, which is essentially helping you develop better understanding, and all the stakeholders are able to make better sense of things. Other software that might actually be useful in our case might be, let's say, like some other low code analysis tools, like as I mentioned, like Power BI dashboards, Tableaus, and other things. And something that, like, from a program management point of view, like deploying Lucidboard, Monday.com. That's broadly the analysis part of it. With respect to reporting, now just the way to look at it would be like different stakeholders would have different requirement, different uh, need of how we are reporting to them. Maybe like an internal audience might need a little different information compared to when you are trying to communicate it to other stakeholders, let's say like a community, right? So in our case, reporting, let's say like in the case study, an internal reporting which might be extremely useful for the teacher would be like how on a weekly basis how many children are actually turning up over and over again. Now that is one information that the teacher might actually find the most use for, because they are the ones who are interacting with the child or with adolescents over and over on a weekly basis, right? And your leadership team might need a different reporting, which might be slightly consolidated of overall teacher assessments, attendance logs, feedbacks, and all those things. External reporting might be slightly different, which might be like a function of uh, which might be like a function of, okay, what are the requirements of donors, what is it that they are funding for, what information we need to submit to them. Similarly, like another function would be like the audit reporting, which is when the audit is happening, okay, like how the program fared, uh, what was the cost that went into it, how we went about utilizing our money, and all those things. So those are the elements that will go in. Similarly, another way to look at it would be, another lens that can be plugged in would be like a time-based reporting, which can be, let's say, like a weekly reporting. In the case study, maybe like attendance log is something that the organization or the program would want on a weekly basis, right? On a monthly basis, we would want to know the feedback that is coming in from on ground, from the children and from the teachers. On a quarterly reporting, we would want to know what is the involvement of all the other stakeholders, how they are feeling. Similarly, half yearly reporting, and on a yearly reporting, factoring in that, okay, like this was the broader impact that we were aiming for, or these were the outcomes. Now, where are we with respect to that? Few mindset that you might need to employ over here would be that, okay, like when you are maintaining the integrity and you are conforming to the broader theory of change, or uh, the log frameworks, the indicators that you set out for. Quite a lot of times, what we end up what the cycle, the pattern that we end up running into is that, depending upon the need, as in when there is a need, somebody asks for data, we tend to like generate insight based on our understanding and try to push for it, which a lot of time tends to create a lot of biases. So a good mindset over here would be that you are actually keeping a track of things that you would want to report on, what are things that you have put in your logical framework, because that is exactly what is going to inform you with respect to whether the program is actually making progress or not. Program evaluation front. So if you remember, like in the beginning, we spoke about the evaluation element. What we mean by evaluation is to understand whether, or to measure whether our program is actually delivering to the goals or results that we were aiming for. Uh, Now, in our case, one thing that we would definitely want to do is get an understanding of process evaluation. This is how how meaningful way or how useful it was for us to build the entire strategy, and how uh, in a like how it was actually delivered on ground, how useful it was. So doing a proper evaluation from an operational lens point of view of the entire process, which includes teachers taking classes, assessments, and all those things. That's something that you would want to do from a process evaluation point of view. The other element that you would that we would want to do over here would be like an outcome evaluation, which would be things that we were aiming for. Now, this is something that our theory of change, our indicators were informing us. Uh, what has been the outcome against the baseline, what outcomes we have received, generated, and the other one being like a comparative analysis. Now, especially for this program, it might be extremely useful, considering that it's something that we were setting out for ourselves. It's a new program. Now we would want to actually compare it. So in a controlled environment, uh, uh, maybe like with an organization or with children who have not uh, gone through the same interventions that the children that we were working with, the adolescents that we were working with. So doing like a comparative analysis, there are different tools that can be employed over here, like maybe like something like RCTs, where you're trying to do certain tests around it. Other ways or methods going about it can be like doing stakeholder surveys, doing in-depth interviews, and generating impact case studies to understand how they value to some of the methods that can be employed over here. Uh, for us, what is extremely going to be critical is evaluation timing. Maybe like doing like a baseline survey. What do we mean by baseline survey? Something that you are doing before the start of your interventions. This is understanding where the literacy scores are at, what are the attendance that are there before you started your interventions. Then maybe like doing like a midline survey. This is maybe like 3 months, 6 months into the programs after you have started your interventions, after the organization has started its intervention. How are the children faring on the literacy front? How the children are faring on the attendance front? How much parents are actually involved? So doing like a midline survey over there, and then doing a year-end survey. This is essentially from a year-end point of view. What is the progress that got made? Again, this would be in conformation with the baseline that has been set. So you would want to report back on that and evaluate back on that. From a utilization and development point of view, what it essentially does, like one way of going about utilization and development, maybe like introducing feedback mechanisms, which would be conducting regular feedback sessions with relevant stakeholders, doing quarterly review meetings with all the relevant players that are involved in it, and trying to adapt. The idea over this entire bit is that, okay, like how we are actually able to bring it back in our focus, which would be in the form of learning and adaptation. So uh, in our case, by the end of the year, like how the the evaluation essentially informs us with respect to some of the strategic improvements that we would want to make to our programs, how we would want to improve our program, and definitely the documentations of learnings and the best practices that are going to be there. Uh, the other element that is there from a mini point of view, from a planning point of view, is from a capacity building. What do we mean by capacity building? Is uh, developing an understanding or building the capacity of the relevant players or the relevant stakeholders that are there in the organization to carry out the monitoring and evaluation for the organization. The first element of it is essentially going to be the need assessment. So what we would want to do in this case study would be like doing a need assessment of be it your program coordinators, the teachers, with respect to how well versed they are with the various tools that are going to be used. That would require doing like a skill auditing for them, doing certain interviews to develop certain level of insight, generate certain level of insight from them. Once you have done the need analysis, then the space that you would want to dwell deeper into would be the training and mentoring, which would be like ensuring that all the players that are there in the system are actually trained on the various M&E tools. This might include training people on the various softwares that you might want to use that we would be using. For example, in this case study, if we are using questionnaires, then ensuring that the teachers who are going to be doing assessment, they're actually trained on that. They know how to administer the questionnaire with the children that they are working with over a period of time. So that's something that you might need to do. Similarly, with respect to the assessment, if the program managers are going to be doing the assessment, then how the what tool is being used. In this case, let's say like if we do like a feedback form, or if we are doing like a CFU, then how that information is getting captured, what are the right questions to ask, whether it is in alignment with the broader goals that we have set out for the many objectives. That's something that need to be done. Another good practice here can essentially be that can it be like an on-job mentoring? What we mean by on-job mentoring could essentially be that maybe like some like in our case it could be like somebody who is new as a teacher can essentially be working with somebody who is experienced. So it's like a mentoring on the job that is being done. Similarly, with respect to all the other the monitoring and the evaluation components or the monitoring components that are going to be there, can it be like a on-job mentoring aided with the right training that is needed. Another element that is needed is with respect to the resource provision. What we mean by over here is that you need to ensure that as an organization, you have the right required resources available that would be needed. Now, let's say like if you are looking at, in our case, if it would be like we are going on ground and training teachers, so ensuring that, okay, like there is a budget for it. If we would be employing an expert to come and do the training, then we need to ensure that, okay, like this is something that we have factored in from a time point of view, from an estimation point of view, those elements. And if you are going to be using any software, for example, if let's say like for data interpretation, if you want to use Tableau or any other software, do you have subscriptions for those? have you taken that into consideration? So ensuring that all the required resources are in place. That is something that would be needed. Collaboration and network. Now, again, one internal to ensure that the like in our case it would be like the teachers are actually collaborating, or in fact like not just the teachers but teachers along with the program managers are collaborating. They're able to generate the relevant insight, people are able to learn with each other and outside the organization as well. A lot of time what ends up happening is that as an organization you might end up going about reinventing the wheel altogether, which we can actually avoid. So it can be like any other organization that might be delivering similar interventions. Can we look at collaborating with them? Can people from their team come and train the employees in our organizations, train the teachers in our organization? So that's something that uh, is something which is beneficial and can be considered. And yeah, another bit that we can factor in, which is maybe like having an MNE altogether for capacity building itself. The broader element being that can we ensure that for the capacity building itself, do we have a framework in place which is ensuring that at all points of time we are able to monitor and evaluate our own capacity building efforts that are happening. So placing the right checks like in the context of the program that we were discussing, the case study, maybe it can be that how well the trainings are being delivered, right? How at what time we were actually able to procure tools. So it can be different things that we can factor in for that. And scalability and sustainability. The way to look at it would be that how sustainable your monitoring and evaluation efforts are going to be. One very good way to go about it would be that can it actually be a part of culture altogether, which is monitoring and evaluation is not something that we chase only during the time of crisis or when we have to report, but can it actually be part of the process altogether across the entire project management or program development for various processes, right? So to ensuring that for every process that we are undertaking, we are factoring in that and ensuring that it is something which can be scaled and it is something which is sustainable over a period of time. Yeah. So firstly, thank you so much, all of you. I hope the session was useful for you all. The As I mentioned, like MNE in itself, like there are a lot of when we start talking about the frameworks, the planning, and all those things, we can dwell way deeper into it, into each of these components. Maybe that's something that we can take up in any other workshop, in any other session. In case if you have any questions, any thoughts, anything that you would want to ask for, I'm more than happy to take it up. I hope it was a useful session for all of you.
Great. Thank you so much, Sakib, for the wonderful session. I think there were certain points in the session that were like really like enlightening, especially like data governance. I don't think a lot of us really thought from a data governance point of view. Also, like, importance of timely reporting. Like we just think of like annual report as like a main like reporting time for us, but of course there are other timely reports also that are required, certain softwares and program evaluation. I think these were some of the great highlights that I came across in this session. And I'm very sure it was really helpful for our audience and our nonprofit community as well. So yes, thank you so much for that. Now I would like to keep the Q&A session open. If you have any question, please raise your hand and please go ahead and ask your question. Or if you want to just put it in the chat box, you can do that as well.
I think there were quite a few requests with respect to the PPT. Maybe like that's something that like I can ask uh, Aishwarya to share across
Yes,
later to everybody who attended.
yes. Okay. I've shared the form with you all. Please fill out this form so we can share the presentation with you. Yeah. Great. Is there any question, any query? I don't think this topic is that easy that we don't have question. So I'm really hoping for questions. Yeah. Or if you have any suggestion, like you are doing something at your organization and that is working out really well, probably that can help other organization as well. Yes. I don't think we have questions, but of course, I've shared the form which has a special request for question. Okay, we have received a question.
I wanted to ask a question, ma'am.
Yes, please go ahead, and then we can take Amrita's question.
Yeah, my name is Bosco, RMM from Staffy Pune and the Epic project. What I wanted to ask you is for monitoring and evaluation, since we work with community-based organizations, not formatted NGOs as such. So sometimes it is difficult to get data from the grassroots levels or from civil society field workers, and therefore evaluation becomes all the more difficult. And then, of course, the next step of capacity building is very challenging. So, if we could know of ways and means to overcome this obstacle, I'd like to just know.
Hi, I'll try to answer that to the best of my capacity. I think there are different models that can essentially be employed, which would be like from a participatory point of view. Uh, what are the like ensuring that all the relevant stakeholders that are there on ground, they are the ones who are actually able to take charge of it. And like another way to look at it would be like how easy you can like how can you simplify the entire process altogether, which is from like what is the like how do you even define impact altogether. So maybe like just breaking it down to a very granular level might actually help. And from an approach point of view, in case if there are no proper systems and all those things, and until you are actually able to develop that, like it could be like from a participatory approach point of view, there's like a strong literature that is already existing around it. Maybe like that's something that you can venture into. I hope that was useful.
May I
Uh,
ask a question?
sure.
Yeah, yes, thank you very much, sir. Very helpful. Thanks.
Yes.
Thank you.
I represent the same organization. My colleague, Mr. Bosco, was raising this question now. I represent the same organization, SOSWA Training and Promotion Institute from Pune. Now, adding on to what just he has mentioned, we quite often face challenges that we work with the community-based organizations, and that too, they have strong.
Parinita, we lost you. I think you went on mute.
There are cases or instances when there are no projects as such with the CBOs. In such a scenario, we face a lot of challenges in what should I say in institutionalizing some kind of a M&D framework within the organization. So how we can address that?
Yeah, I think like what I was responding to George also, if I got the name right, pardon if not. One, because I was mentioning like the what like was mentioning the participatory approach. Second is maybe like trying to like re-ask the entire question altogether as to what we are trying to achieve from an impact point of view and whether it's actually fit in the framework or not. So if it is not fitting in the framework, like there is enough and more literature that is existing out there, because these are the challenges that a lot of other organizations also faces that can also be looked into. I mean, like that's all the information that I would have on that parameter.
Yeah,
from my
because
capacity point of view.
first of all, I must compliment. Yeah, we must compliment and congratulate you that on a very highly technical aspect of monitoring and evaluation, which is we keep saying a very allergetic area for the voluntary sector. You have made it a very wonderful session. But then, after listening to you, what we realize is if there are some programs or some activities with the organization, what you explained with one example, that is fair enough and excellent. We must compliment you for that. But then these are our challenges that CBO is working with the communities, maybe on a small scale. But as such, project wise, as a project, you can't identify, but the work is going on. And the CBO and the organization like us who is involved in their capacity building or strengthening their organizational development processes has
Yeah,
the challenges in, as I said, inculcating some basic M&D framework within the organization.
got it.
Yes.
Got it.
So
Got it. So yeah, like I think uh yeah, like what from my understanding on that, Pranita, it could be uh like I would, considering that we are like I'm not able to one visualize as to how the problem statement is actually looking like. Maybe that's something like if it in the feedback form, if you would want to share it across, I would love to respond to it as to what is the actual problem, and is it feasible for it also to, in an ideal case scenario, it should be able to confirm in any of the frameworks that are existing out there. If it is not, then how we can actually go about it is something that I can take up and maybe respond later.
yes, thank you.
Hi,
Thank you.
Parinita. Yes, I have shared the form with you. Kindly fill out your query and question, and we will be happy to resolve them. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think there was one question from Amrita. What is the
Yes.
difference between the output and the outcome? Is it just in terms of time or something else? One, definitely time is a factor to it, but the other way to look at it would be like outcome is something that you are like, for example, in the case study that we undertook, outcome was that, okay, like we want to ensure that the literacy scores of children are getting better. So output was that, okay, like the efforts that are actually going in from our side, which was the number of teachers that are getting trained, the number of sessions that are happening on ground or with our team to deliver to those outcomes. So outcomes are slightly intermediary. Outputs would be uh, rather more immediate bits that would follow. So it wouldn't just be in the definition of like short term, long term, and intermediary. There is a slightly different lens attached to it.
Thank you so much, Sakib.